The smoke rose in thick black columns against the azure Nevada sky, and Martha Reynolds knew she had perhaps 10 minutes before the prairie fire would consume everything she owned, including her life. She stood in the doorway of her small timber house on the outskirts of El Dorado Canyon, clutching the quilt she had been working on for 3 months, her hands trembling as she watched the wall of orange flames race across the dry grassland toward her home. It was September 1878, and the drought had turned the prairie into kindling. One spark from a passing train or a careless campfire, and the whole world could burn. Now it was burning, and Martha was alone. Her parents had died the previous winter from influenza, leaving her the house and 20 acres of scrubland that barely produced enough to keep her fed. She made her living with her needle and thread, creating quilts that the women in town praised for their intricate patterns and tight stitching. But no amount of skill with fabric would save her now. Martha ran back inside, her mind racing through impossible calculations. She could not carry much. The wagon was gone, sold last month to pay debts. Her horse had gone lame 2 weeks ago, and she had not yet saved enough to replace it. She grabbed a canvas bag and began stuffing it with whatever seemed most valuable, her movements frantic and uncoordinated. Photographs of her parents, a silver locket, the Bible her grandmother had carried across the plains, her sewing kit, another quilt, this one made by her mother. The air had grown thick with smoke, and she could hear the fire now, a distant roar like an approaching train. She stumbled outside again, the bag over her shoulder, and looked desperately toward town. It was 3 miles away, too far to run before the flames caught her. The fire was moving fast, pushed by the desert wind that never seemed to stop blowing through this God-forsaken country. She started running anyway, her boots kicking up dust on the dirt path, her lungs already burning from the smoke. Behind her, embers began falling like burning snow, landing in the dry grass around her property. One caught on the corner of her roof, and within seconds, flames were licking up the wooden shingles. Martha ran harder, tears streaming down her face, but she knew it was hopeless. The fire was faster than she was, and it was everywhere now, spreading in all directions, fed by wind and drought and bad luck. She could feel the heat on her back, could hear the crackling intensify. Her foot caught on a stone and she fell hard, the wind knocked from her lungs, her bag spilling its contents across the ground. She scrambled to gather her things, coughing in the smoke, her vision blurring. This was how she would die, she realized. Alone in the desert, surrounded by fire, at 22 years old, with nothing to show for her life but some quilts and a patch of worthless land. Then she heard the hoofbeats. They came from the west, thundering across the prairie, and Martha looked up through the smoke to see a rider approaching at full gallop. The horse was a paint, brown and white, and the man riding it sat tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the smoke. He did not slow down as he approached. Instead, he leaned sideways in the saddle, his arm outstretched, and shouted something Martha could not hear over the roar of the fire. She understood anyway. She reached up, and his hand locked around her wrist with iron strength. He hauled her up with one smooth motion, pulling her across the saddle in front of him, and the horse wheeled around without breaking stride. Martha clutched the saddle horn, her bag forgotten on the ground, as the rider spurred his horse away from the flames. The paint ran like its tail was on fire, and perhaps it was because embers were raining down all around them now. The rider bent low over Martha, shielding her with his body, and she could smell leather and sweat and horse and something else, something clean like soap or pine. They rode hard for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the fire chasing them across the prairie. until finally they reached a rocky outcropping where the ground was bare, and the flames had nothing to feed on. The rider pulled his horse to a stop and dismounted in one fluid motion, then reached up to help Martha down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet hit the ground, but he steadied her, his hands firm on her arms. She looked up at him for the first time and saw a man in his middle 20s, with sun-darkened skin and gray eyes that looked almost silver in the smoke-dimmed light. He had a strong jaw covered in several days of stubble, and a scar that ran from his right temple into his hairline. He was tall and lean, built like someone who spent his life in the saddle, and he was looking at her with an expression of concern that made her throat tighten. "Are you hurt?" His voice was deep and rough like gravel. Martha shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. She looked back at the fire which had consumed the horizon and felt her knees buckle. The man caught her before she fell, lowering her gently to sit on a flat rock. "Easy," he said. "You are safe now. The fire will burn itself out when it hits the canyon, nothing there to fuel it." "My house," Martha managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. "Everything I own." "Better your house than your life," the man said. He pulled a canteen from his saddle and offered it to her. "Drink, small sips." The water was warm and tasted of metal, but it was the most wonderful thing Martha had ever experienced. She drank carefully, mindful of his instruction, and when she lowered the canteen, she found him watching her with those strange gray eyes. "Thank you," she said. "You saved my life." He shrugged, as if riding into a prairie fire to rescue a stranger was something he did every Tuesday. "Saw the smoke from the ridge. Figured someone might be out here." "I am Martha Reynolds," she said, because it seemed important to introduce herself to the man who had just saved her life. "Austin Jennings," he replied. He took the canteen back and drank, his throat working as he swallowed, then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "You live out here alone?" "I did," Martha said, looking at the fire again. "I do not know what I will do now." Austin followed her gaze, his expression thoughtful. "You have family in town? Friends?" "Some," Martha said. "The women who buy my quilts. I suppose I can stay at the boarding house until I figure something out." She felt the weight of her situation settling on her shoulders like a yoke. "I had a little money saved, but it was in the house. I have nothing now, nothing but the clothes on my back." Austin was quiet for a moment, then he crouched down beside her so they were at eye level. "The boarding house will take you in. Mrs. Calloway owes me a favor. I will make sure you have a room and meals until you get on your feet." Martha blinked, surprised by this offer from a man she had met 5 minutes ago. "I cannot ask you to do that." "You are not asking. I am offering." He stood and moved back to his horse, checking the animal for burns or injuries. "Besides, like I said, Mrs. Calloway owes me. Helped her son out of a tight spot last year. She will be happy to repay the debt." "What kind of tight spot?" Martha asked, then immediately wished she had not. It was none of her business, but Austin did not seem offended. "He got drunk and started a fight with the wrong people. I made sure he got home in one piece and convinced the men not to press charges. His mother was grateful." "Are you a lawman?" Martha asked, studying him. He did not wear a badge, but there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested authority. "No," Austin said. He ran a hand down his horse's neck, soothing the animal. "Just a cowboy. I work for the Double R Ranch about 10 miles north of here. Was on my way back from a supply run when I saw the smoke." Martha stood on shaky legs, brushing dust and ash from her dress. It was ruined, she realized. The hem was scorched, the fabric torn in several places. Her hair had come loose from its pins and hung in tangled waves down her back. She probably looked like she had been dragged behind a wagon. "I must look a fright," she said without thinking. Austin glanced at her and something flickered in his eyes, gone too fast for her to identify. "You look like someone who just survived a prairie fire. That is no small thing." The fire burned through the afternoon and into the evening, finally dying out when it reached the canyon walls and bare rock faces that had given El Dorado Canyon its name. Austin kept Martha on the ridge, safe from the flames, and they watched in silence as everything she owned turned to ash and smoke. When the fire had passed and only smoldering ruins remained, Austin helped Martha back onto his horse. She sat in front of him again, acutely aware of his arms on either side of her as he held the reins, his chest against her back. It should have felt uncomfortable, sharing such close quarters with a stranger, but instead Martha felt only gratitude and a strange sense of safety. They rode into El Dorado Canyon as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Martha too much of the fire. The town was small, just one main street with false-fronted buildings on either side. A general store, a saloon, a bank, a church, the boarding house, and a handful of other establishments. People were outside, watching the smoke in the distance, talking in low voices about the fire. They all turned to stare as Austin rode past with Martha in his saddle. She kept her eyes forward, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Everyone would know by morning that Austin Jennings had pulled her from the fire, and tongues would wag about what that might mean. In a town this small, everything was everyone's business. Austin stopped in front of the boarding house, a two-story structure with a wide porch and lace curtains in the windows. He dismounted and helped Martha down, then tied his horse to the rail and gestured for her to follow him inside. The interior was cool and dim after the heat of the fire, and it smelled like cooking meat and bread. Martha's stomach growled, reminding her that she had not eaten since breakfast. A woman emerged from a back room, wiping her hands on her apron. She was in her 50s, with gray-streaked brown hair and a comfortable, motherly figure. "Austin Jennings," she said, her face breaking into a smile. "What brings you to town? I heard there was a fire out on the prairie." "There was, Mrs. Calloway," Austin said. "This is Miss Martha Reynolds. She lost her house and everything in it. I am hoping you might have a room for her." Mrs. Calloway's expression shifted immediately to one of sympathy and concern. Of course, you poor dear. Come, sit down. You look about ready to fall over." She bustled forward and took Martha's arm, guiding her to a chair at a long dining table. "I will get you some food. Are you hurt?" "No," Martha said. "Just tired and dirty. A bath, then, after you eat," Mrs. Calloway said decisively. "Austin, you are staying for dinner." "I should get back to the ranch," Austin said, but Mrs. Calloway waved a hand dismissively. "Nonsense. It is almost dark, and your horse needs rest after a ride like that. You will eat, stay the night, and head back in the morning. I will not take no for an answer." Austin looked like he wanted to argue, but then his stomach growled audibly, and he nodded. "I would appreciate that, madam." Mrs. Calloway disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Austin and Martha alone in the dining room. Austin removed his hat and set it on the table, revealing hair that was dark brown and slightly too long, curling at his collar. He sat down across from Martha, and for a moment they just looked at each other. "Thank you," Martha said again, because she could not seem to stop saying it. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." "There is nothing to repay," Austin said. "Anyone would have done the same." "But they did not," Martha pointed out. "You did." Austin looked uncomfortable with her gratitude, and Martha wondered if he was the type of man who did good deeds without expecting recognition. She suspected he was. Mrs. Calloway returned with 2 plates piled high with roast beef, potatoes, carrots, and thick slices of bread. She set them down in front of Austin and Martha, then brought glasses of water and a pot of coffee. "Eat," she commanded. "Both of you. You look half-starved, Miss Reynolds." Martha did not need to be told twice. She ate with single-minded focus, barely tasting the food, just needing to fill the hollow ache in her stomach. Across from her, Austin ate more slowly, but with the same steady determination. When they were finished, Mrs. Calloway cleared their plates and announced that she was drawing a bath for Martha upstairs. "I will find you something clean to wear," she added. "My daughter left some dresses here when she moved to California. You look about the same size." Martha felt tears prick her eyes at this kindness from a woman who barely knew her. "Thank you, Mrs. Calloway. I do not know what I would have done without you and Mr. Jennings." "We take care of our own here," Mrs. Calloway said firmly. "Now come along. That bath is waiting." Martha stood, her legs aching with exhaustion, and followed Mrs. Calloway upstairs. At the door, she glanced back and found Austin watching her. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, something Martha could not quite name. Then she turned and went upstairs, leaving him alone in the dining room. The bath was heaven. Martha scrubbed the smoke and ash from her skin and hair, watching the water turn gray, then soaked until it grew cold. Mrs. Calloway had left a simple blue cotton dress on the bed, along with undergarments, stockings, and a pair of worn but serviceable shoes. Everything was a little too big, but Martha did not care. She was clean and clothed and alive, and that was more than she had expected 6 hours ago. She found a brush on the washstand and worked through the tangles in her hair, then braided it loosely down her back. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who looked older than 22, with shadows under her eyes and a tightness around her mouth that had not been there that morning. Martha went downstairs slowly, her muscles protesting every step. The dining room was empty now, but she could hear voices from the kitchen. She followed the sound and found Mrs. Calloway washing dishes while Austin dried them with a towel. It was such a domestic scene, such an ordinary thing, that Martha stopped in the doorway and just watched for a moment. "You look much better," Mrs. Calloway said when she noticed Martha. "How do you feel?" "Like I was dragged behind a horse," Martha admitted, "but better than I did." "You should rest," Austin said. He set down the dish he was drying and turned to face her. "It has been a long day." "For both of us," Martha said. She looked at Mrs. Calloway. "I need to be honest with you. I have no money to pay for the room or the food. Everything I had was in the house. But I can work. I am good with a needle. I can sew, mend, make quilts. If you give me time, I can repay you." "We will work something out," Mrs. Calloway said. "Do not worry about that now. For tonight, just rest. We can talk about the details tomorrow." Austin picked up his hat from where he had left it in the dining room. "I should see to my horse." "There is a room for you upstairs," Mrs. Calloway said. "Second door on the right. I put out clean towels." "Thank you, madam," Austin nodded to Martha. "Good night, Miss Reynolds." "Good night, Mr. Jennings," Martha said. "And thank you again." He nodded again and went out the back door toward the small stable behind the boarding house. Martha watched him go, then turned to find Mrs. Calloway watching her with an expression that Martha could not quite read. "He is a good man," Mrs. Calloway said. "One of the best I have known. If he says he will help you, he will." "I can see that," Martha said softly. "Come," Mrs. Calloway said, untying her apron. "I will show you to your room." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a chair, and a window that looked out onto the main street. Martha sat on the bed and found it comfortable, the mattress stuffed with straw but covered with a thick quilt that looked handmade. She ran her fingers over the stitching, admiring the workmanship, the tiny, even stitches that held the pattern together. "That was made by a woman who used to live here," Mrs. Calloway said from the doorway. She moved on years ago, but she left that behind, said it was payment for my kindness. I think she would be happy knowing it is keeping someone else warm now. Martha looked up, tears blurring her vision. It is beautiful work. I have heard yours is even better, Mrs. Calloway said. Some of the ladies in town have shown me the quilts you made for them. You have real talent, Miss Reynolds. That will serve you well here. After Mrs. Calloway left, Martha lay down on the bed fully clothed and stared at the ceiling. She thought about her house, now nothing but charred wood and ash. She thought about her parents, buried in the small cemetery outside town. She thought about Austin Jennings, riding into the fire without hesitation, pulling her to safety with one strong arm. She fell asleep thinking about those gray eyes and woke in the morning to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of voices downstairs. For a moment, she did not know where she was. Then memory returned, and with it, the crushing weight of her loss. Martha got up and splashed water on her face from the basin on the washstand. She braided her hair again, pinched her cheeks to give them some color, and went downstairs to face whatever came next. The dining room was full of people eating breakfast. Mrs. Calloway was moving between tables with a coffee pot, filling cups and chatting with her guests. She saw Martha and waved her over to an empty seat at the end of one table. "There is porridge and bacon and eggs," Mrs. Calloway said. "Help yourself. Everything is on the sideboard." Martha filled a plate and sat down, trying not to notice the curious glances from the other diners. A woman across from her leaned forward and said, "You are the quilter, are you not? The one whose house burned yesterday?" "Yes," Martha said quietly. "I am so sorry," the woman said, and she sounded sincere. "That must have been terrifying." "It was," Martha admitted, "but I was lucky. Austin Jennings pulled me out before the fire could reach me." "Austin is a good man," another woman said, nodding. "He helped my husband fix our barn last spring, would not take any payment for it either." "He seems very kind," Martha said, and she meant it. "Are you going to rebuild?" the first woman asked. Martha had not thought that far ahead. "I do not know. I do not have the money for it right now." "Well, if you need work, I could use someone to help with sewing," the woman said. "I run the general store and we sell fabric and notions. I have been meaning to offer alterations and mending services, but I do not have time to do it myself. If you are interested, we could work something out." Martha felt hope kindle in her chest. "I would be very interested, Mrs. Parker, Lillian Parker." The woman smiled. "Come by the store later today and we can discuss details." "Thank you," Martha said. "I will do that." After breakfast, Martha helped Mrs. Calloway clear the dishes and wash up, insisting that she wanted to do something to earn her keep. As they worked, Mrs. Calloway told her about the town, who was who, which families had lived there the longest, where to buy the best fabric at the lowest prices. "Austin left early this morning," Mrs. Calloway said casually as she scrubbed a plate. "He said to tell you goodbye and that he would check on you next time he is in town." Martha felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. She had wanted to thank him again, to talk to him in daylight when she was not covered in smoke and ash. But of course he had to get back to the ranch. He had his own life, his own responsibilities. She could not expect him to stay just because she wanted to see him again. "Did he say when that would be?" Martha asked, trying to sound casual. "Austin comes to town about once a week for supplies," Mrs. Calloway said. "Sometimes more often if there is work to be done at the ranch that requires tools or materials. You will see him again." Martha nodded and focused on the dishes, trying not to think about gray eyes and strong hands and a voice like gravel. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and adjustment. Martha took the job at Mrs. Parker's general store, doing alterations and mending for customers. The work was steady, and Mrs. Parker paid her fairly. Martha also took on quilting commissions in the evenings, working by lamplight in her room at the boarding house, her needle flashing as she created patterns from scraps of fabric. She saw Austin twice during that time, brief encounters when he came to town for supplies. The first time, he stopped by the general store to buy nails and rope, and they exchanged pleasantries. The second time, she was walking back to the boarding house after delivering a finished quilt to a customer when she nearly ran into him on the street. "Miss Reynolds," he said, tipping his hat. "How are you settling in?" "Well, thank you," Martha said. "I have work now, and Mrs. Calloway has been very kind about letting me stay at the boarding house." "That is good," Austin said. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but then another man called his name from across the street, and he excused himself with an apologetic smile. Martha watched him go, feeling foolish for the disappointment that washed over her. He had saved her life, nothing more. She could not expect him to become a permanent fixture in it. But she thought about him often as she worked, remembering the feel of his arms around her as they rode away from the fire, the concern in his eyes when he asked if she was hurt. She told herself it was just gratitude, that any woman would feel the same way about a man who had saved her life. But late at night, when she was alone in her room with only her quilts for company, she admitted the truth to herself. She was drawn to Austin Jennings in a way that had nothing to do with gratitude. One evening in October, as Martha was finishing up a quilt for a customer, Mrs. Calloway knocked on her door. "You have a visitor downstairs," she said, her eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement. Martha set down her needle and went downstairs to find Austin standing in the parlor, his hat in his hands, looking uncomfortable. He was cleaner than she had seen him before, his hair damp like he had just bathed, his jaw freshly shaved. "Mr. Jennings," Martha said, surprised. "Is something wrong?" "No," Austin said quickly. I wanted to check on you, make sure you were doing all right." "I am," Martha said. "Thanks to you and Mrs. Calloway and Mrs. Parker, everyone has been very kind." Austin nodded, still looking uncomfortable. "That is good." "I am glad to hear it." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, and then Martha said, "Would you like to sit down? Mrs. Calloway usually serves tea in the evening." "I do not want to impose," Austin said. "You are not," Martha assured him. "Please sit." They sat in the parlor, and Mrs. Calloway brought tea and cookies, giving Martha a knowing look before she disappeared back into the kitchen. Martha poured tea for both of them, her hands steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. "How is work at the ranch?" she asked, searching for something to say. "Busy," Austin said. "We are preparing for winter, making sure the cattle are moved to lower pastures, repairing fences and buildings. It is always something." "Have you worked there long?" "5 years," Austin said. "I came to Nevada from Texas after the war, needed a fresh start, and the Double R was hiring." Martha knew without asking which war he meant. The Civil War had ended 13 years ago, but its scars still marked the country and the men who had fought in it. She did not ask which side he had fought for. It did not matter now. "You like it here?" she asked instead. Austin considered the question, sipping his tea. "I do. It is hard country, but it is honest. A man can make a life here if he is willing to work for it." "And a woman?" Martha asked with a small smile. Austin looked at her, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "A woman too." "You have proven that already, Miss Reynolds. You lost everything and managed to land on your feet in just a few weeks. That takes strength." "I had help," Martha said softly. "You would have managed even without it," Austin said with certainty. "But I am glad I was there all the same." They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing more easily now. Austin told her about life on the ranch, about the other cowboys he worked with, about the owner, Mr. Richardson, who was fair but demanding. Martha told him about her work at the store and the quilts she was making, about the customers who came in with impossible requests, and the satisfaction of completing a particularly complex pattern. When Austin finally stood to leave, Martha walked him to the door. On the porch, he turned to face her and they stood close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his gray eyes. "May I call on you again?" Austin asked, his voice low. "If that would be acceptable." Martha felt warmth bloom in her chest. "I would like that very much." Austin smiled and it transformed his face, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. "Then I will see you soon, Miss Reynolds." "Martha," she said. "Please call me Martha." "Martha," Austin repeated, and her name sounded different in his voice, like something precious. "Good night." "Good night, Austin." She watched from the porch as he untied his horse and mounted up, then rode out of town into the gathering darkness. Behind her, Mrs. Calloway chuckled softly. "That man is smitten with you." Martha turned, her cheeks flushing. "Do you think so?" "I know so, Mrs. Calloway said. "I have seen many things in my years, and I know what it looks like when a man is falling in love. Austin Jennings has it bad for you, Miss Reynolds." Martha went to bed that night with a smile on her face, her fingers tracing the pattern on the quilt that covered her, thinking about silver eyes and a voice like gravel saying her name. Austin came to town every few days after that, always finding reasons to stop by the general store or the boarding house. Sometimes he brought Martha little gifts, a ribbon for her hair, a packet of needles, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy. They took walks together when Martha finished work, strolling down the main street and out toward the edge of town, where the desert stretched endlessly under the big Nevada sky. They talked about everything and nothing. Austin told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to ride before he could walk, about losing his family to fever when he was 17. Martha told him about her childhood, about learning to quilt from her mother, about the loneliness of losing her parents and being alone in the world. "You are not alone now," Austin said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "You have friends here. You have me." Martha looked at him, at the way the fading light caught in his hair and shadowed the planes of his face. "Do I have you, Austin?" He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "If you want me, yes. I know I do not have much to offer, just a cowboy's wages and a small room at the ranch bunkhouse. But I can promise I will work hard and treat you right and never give you cause to regret it if you choose me." Martha's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I choose you," she said simply. "I have been choosing you since the day you rode into that fire." Austin reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his palms rough and warm against her skin. "I am going to kiss you now, if that is all right." "Please," Martha whispered. He kissed her slowly, gently, like she was something precious and fragile. His lips were soft despite the roughness of his hands, and Martha felt something inside her unfurl and bloom like a flower opening to the sun. When they pulled apart, she was breathless, and Austin was looking at her with such tenderness that she wanted to cry. "I love you, Martha Reynolds," he said. "I think I loved you from the moment I saw you standing in that fire, refusing to give up." "I love you too," Martha said, and it was the easiest truth she had ever spoken. They courted properly after that, under the watchful eyes of Mrs. Calloway and the rest of El Dorado Canyon. Austin came to Sunday dinners at the boarding house, and Martha visited the Double R Ranch with him, meeting the other cowboys and Mr. Richardson, who looked her up and down and pronounced her a good, sturdy girl who would not wilt at the first sign of trouble. Martha was not sure if that was a compliment, but Austin assured her it was the highest praise the ranch owner ever gave anyone. In December, as the Nevada desert turned cold and the winds howled down from the mountains, Austin asked Martha to marry him. They were sitting in the parlor at the boarding house, and he got down on one knee with a ring he had saved 3 months of wages to buy. "It is not much," he said, showing her the simple gold band with a small diamond chip. "But it is yours if you will have it, if you will have me." Martha pulled him to his feet and kissed him, the ring clutched in her hand. "Yes," she said against his lips. "Yes, yes, yes." They were married on Christmas Eve in the small church in El Dorado Canyon with Mrs. Calloway and Mrs. Parker and half the town in attendance. Martha wore a dress that the women of the town had helped her make, white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Austin wore a new suit that fit him awkwardly, like he was not used to anything but work clothes. But he looked at Martha like she was the only person in the world, and that was all she needed. After the ceremony, there was a celebration at the boarding house with food and music and dancing. Austin danced with Martha in the parlor, holding her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder and thought about how much her life had changed in 4 months. She had gone from being alone and terrified in a burning prairie to being loved and safe in the arms of a good man. "What are you thinking?" Austin asked, his breath warm against her ear. "That I am the luckiest woman in the world," Martha said. "I am the lucky one," Austin corrected. "I found you in a fire and got to keep you. That is more than most men can say." Mr. Richardson gave them a wedding gift of a small cabin on the ranch property, 2 rooms and a loft, with a stove and a bed and a table and chairs. It was not much, but it was theirs, and Martha set about making it a home. She sewed curtains for the windows and quilts for the bed. She cooked meals on the stove and tended a small garden in the spring. Austin left for work before dawn and came back after sunset, tired and dirty but always happy to see her. Their life was not easy. The work was hard and money was tight, and the Nevada desert was unforgiving to those who did not respect its power. But they were happy. Austin was patient and kind, always ready with a smile or a kiss or a word of encouragement. Martha learned to manage a household on very little, stretching every penny, making do with what they had. In the evenings, they sat together by the stove, Austin mending tack or carving small figures from wood while Martha worked on her quilts. She still took commissions, and the extra money helped them save for the future. Austin watched her work sometimes, fascinated by the way her fingers flew over the fabric, creating patterns from chaos. "How do you know where every piece goes?" he asked one night. "I just see it," Martha said, holding up the quilt she was working on. "The pattern is in my head and I follow it. Each piece has its place." "Like people," Austin said thoughtfully. "Everyone has their place in the world. Some of us just have to search harder to find it." "And have you found your place?" Martha asked, setting down her needle. Austin looked at her, and in his eyes she saw everything they had built together, all the love and trust and partnership. "I found it when I found you." The first year of their marriage passed quickly, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythms of ranch life. In the summer, Martha thought she might be pregnant, but it turned out to be a false alarm. She was disappointed, but Austin held her and told her they had time, that there was no rush. "We will have children when we are meant to," he said. "For now, I am just happy to have you." In the fall, a drought hit the region, worse than the one that had caused the Prairie fire. The ranch struggled, and Mr. Richardson had to let some of the cowboys go. Austin kept his job, but his wages were cut. Martha took on more quilting work, staying up late into the night to finish commissions, her fingers cramping and her eyes burning with fatigue. "You are working too hard," Austin said, worry creasing his forehead. "So are you," Martha pointed out. "We do what we must." The drought broke in November with a series of storms that turned the desert green and filled the dry creek beds with rushing water. The ranch recovered, and Mr. Richardson restored the cowboys' wages. Austin and Martha celebrated by buying chickens for their small yard, a luxury they had not been able to afford before. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Martha discovered she was pregnant. This time, there was no false alarm. She felt different, her body changing in subtle ways, and when the town doctor confirmed her suspicions, she rode back to the ranch with joy singing in her veins. Austin was in the corral working with a young horse when she arrived. She stood at the fence and called his name, and when he came over, she took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "We are going to have a baby," she said. Austin's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, confusion, understanding, and then pure joy. He vaulted over the fence and picked Martha up, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "A baby," he said, setting her down carefully like she was made of glass. "We are going to have a baby. In the fall," Martha said. "October, the doctor thinks." Austin kissed her hard and quick, then kissed her again, slower this time. "I am going to be a father. I cannot believe it." "Believe it," Martha said, laughing at his expression. "You have 8 months to get used to the idea." The pregnancy was not easy. Martha was sick for the first 3 months, unable to keep much food down, losing weight instead of gaining it. Austin hovered over her like a nervous hen, trying to tempt her with different foods, bringing her water, rubbing her back when she was ill. As the sickness passed and Martha started to show, Austin became even more protective, insisting she not lift anything heavy or work too hard. "I am pregnant, not made of china," Martha protested when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I know," Austin said, "but humor me. I have never done this before, and I want to make sure you and the baby are safe." Martha softened at that. "We are safe, but I will let you help if it makes you feel better." As her belly grew, Martha had to stop taking commissions for a while. She could not sit hunched over a quilt frame for hours anymore without her back aching. Instead, she focused on making things for the baby: tiny gowns and blankets, and a quilt with a pattern of stars that she had designed herself. Austin built a cradle from wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk, painting it white. He set it up in the corner of their bedroom, and sometimes Martha would find him standing over it, his hand resting on the rails, a distant look in his eyes. "What are you thinking about?" she asked one night. "About being a father," Austin said. "About teaching our child to ride, to work with their hands, to be a good person. I am nervous, Martha." "What if I am not good at it? You will be wonderful," Martha said with certainty. "You are kind and patient and strong. Our child will be lucky to have you as a father." Austin pulled her into his arms, careful of her swollen belly. "And they will be lucky to have you as a mother, the best quilter in Nevada and the strongest woman I know." Martha went into labor on a cold October morning, 3 weeks before the doctor had predicted. Austin had just left for work, and she was making breakfast when the first pain hit, doubling her over the stove. She managed to get to the door and call for one of the other ranch wives, who came running and helped her back to bed. Someone rode for the doctor, while another woman went to fetch Austin from the north pasture where he was working. By the time he burst through the door, wild-eyed and breathing hard, Martha was well into labor, the pains coming fast and hard. "I am here," Austin said, taking her hand. "I am right here." "I know," Martha gasped. "I knew you would come." The labor lasted 6 hours, and by the end of it, Martha was exhausted, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, her throat raw from crying out. But when the doctor placed a small, wriggling, wailing baby boy in her arms, all the pain disappeared. "A son," the doctor said, smiling. "Healthy and strong, just like his parents." Austin stared at the baby, his face filled with wonder. He reached out and touched the tiny hand, and the baby's fingers curled around his thumb. "He is perfect," Austin whispered. "He is absolutely perfect. They named him Thomas after Austin's father. He had Martha's dark hair and Austin's gray eyes, and from the moment he was born, he owned both their hearts completely. Austin was a devoted father, getting up in the night to walk with Thomas when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, singing to him in a rough but tender voice. Martha watched them together and felt her heart swell with love so fierce it almost hurt. This was her family. This was her life, and it was more than she had ever dreamed of. Thomas grew quickly, a happy baby who smiled easily and rarely cried. Martha strapped him to her chest while she worked, and he would watch her hands move over the quilts with wide, fascinated eyes. Austin taught him to reach for things, to grasp, to hold on tight. "He has a good grip," Austin said proudly when Thomas was 4 months old and clutching Austin's finger. "He will be a horseman, or a quilter," Martha teased. "Or both," Austin said. "He can be anything he wants." When Thomas was a year old, Mr. Richardson promoted Austin to foreman, recognizing his hard work and dedication. The promotion came with a raise and a larger house on the ranch, 3 rooms and a real porch. Martha cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by how far they had come. "You deserve this," Austin said, holding her while Thomas played at their feet. "We both do. We have worked hard." They moved into the new house, and Martha set about making it a home. She hung her quilts on the walls and set up her quilting frame in the corner of the main room. She planted flowers in the yard and vegetables in a garden plot. Austin built a swing on the porch, and Thomas loved being pushed on it, shrieking with laughter as he flew through the air. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Austin worked long hours, but he was home for dinner every night, and he always had time to play with Thomas before bed. Martha took up quilting commissions again, working while Thomas napped or played nearby. The extra money went into savings, a nest egg for the future. When Thomas was 2, Martha became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier and she felt strong throughout. Their daughter was born in the spring, a tiny, perfect girl with dark hair and a serious expression. They named her Grace, and she was as different from Thomas as night from day. Where he was rambunctious and loud, she was quiet and watchful. Where he ran everywhere, she moved carefully, taking in the world with solemn eyes. Austin loved them both fiercely, though he confessed to Martha late one night that he was terrified of raising a daughter. "I know how to teach a boy," he said, "but a girl, what do I know about that?" "You will figure it out," Martha said, kissing his cheek. "Just love her. That is all she needs." And Austin did. He was gentle with Grace, patient with her shyness, always ready to scoop her up when she reached for him. Thomas adored his little sister, bringing her toys and trying to make her laugh. The 4 of them were a unit, a family bound by love and hard work, and the shared experience of building a life in the harsh Nevada desert. The years passed, marked by birthdays and Christmases and quiet evenings by the fire. Thomas grew tall and strong, learning to ride and rope and work cattle alongside his father. Grace learned to sew from Martha, her stitches tiny and precise, her patterns complex and beautiful. They were good children, polite and hardworking, and Martha and Austin were proud of them. When Martha was 32 and Austin was 35, she became pregnant one last time. The pregnancy was difficult, her body older now and less resilient. But in the winter, she gave birth to another son, a big, healthy baby they named Samuel. He had Austin's build and Martha's eyes, and from the moment he was born, he was determined to keep up with his older siblings. 3 children, Austin said, holding Samuel while Thomas and Grace crowded around to see their new brother. "We have been blessed, Martha." "We have," Martha agreed, watching her family with tears of joy in her eyes. "More than I ever thought possible." The children grew and the ranch prospered. Mr. Richardson retired and sold the double R to Austin, who had saved enough over the years to make a down payment. It was a risk, taking on that much debt, but Austin was confident they could make it work. And they did, through hard work and careful management, and a bit of luck. Martha's quilts became famous throughout Nevada, commissioned by women who were willing to pay good money for her skill and artistry. She taught Grace and eventually Thomas and Samuel how to sew, passing on the knowledge her mother had given her. The quilts she made told stories in fabric and thread, patterns that spoke of the desert and the sky and the resilience of the human spirit. One evening, when Martha was 45 and the children were grown or nearly so, she and Austin sat on the porch watching the sunset. Thomas was running the ranch now, having taken over most of the day-to-day operations. Grace was married to a good man in town and had given them 2 grandchildren. Samuel was still at home, learning the business and planning to attend university in California the next year. "We have done well," Austin said, his hand finding Martha's in the space between their rocking chairs. "Better than I ever dreamed when I rode into that fire all those years ago." 27 years, Martha said softly. "Hard to believe it has been that long." "Best 27 years of my life," Austin said. He squeezed her hand. "Do you ever think about that day, about what would have happened if I had not seen the smoke?" "Sometimes," Martha admitted, "but not often. I cannot imagine a life without you in it, so it is hard to picture." "I think about it," Austin said. "I think about how close I came to losing you before I ever had you, about how lucky I was to be in the right place at the right time." Martha turned to look at him, this man who had saved her life and then filled it with love and children and purpose. His hair was gray now, his face lined with years of work under the desert sun. But his eyes were still the same silver gray that had captivated her that first day, and when he looked at her, she still felt like the most precious thing in the world. "You wove yourself into my life forever," Martha said, the words coming from somewhere deep inside her. "Like a thread in one of my quilts, you are part of the pattern now, part of everything I am." Austin's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "And you into mine. Everything good in my life started the day I met you." They sat in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that no longer reminded Martha of fire but of beauty and possibility. The desert stretched out before them, harsh and unforgiving but also magnificent in its own way. This was their home, the place where they had built their life together, and Martha could not imagine being anywhere else. Thomas came out onto the porch, his own son perched on his hip. "Mother, father, dinner is ready. Are you coming in?" "In a moment," Austin said, not taking his eyes off Martha. Thomas smiled, recognizing something in the way his parents looked at each other, and went back inside. Through the window, Martha could see her family gathering around the table, Thomas and his wife, Grace visiting with her children, Samuel setting out plates. It was a full house tonight, loud and chaotic and perfect. "Come," Martha said, standing and holding out her hand to Austin. "Let us go be with our family." Austin stood and pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Our family. I still cannot believe sometimes that this is real, that I get to have this life with you." "Believe it," Martha said, echoing the words she had spoken when she told him she was pregnant with Thomas all those years ago. "This is real, and it is ours." They went inside together, hand in hand, and Martha looked around the table at the faces of the people she loved most in the world. Her children, her grandchildren, her husband. This was her legacy, not the quilts she had made, though those would endure, but this family built on love and trust and the decision to keep choosing each other every single day. After dinner, when the children had gone to their respective homes or bedrooms, Martha sat by the fire with her quilting frame, working on a new piece. This one was special, a wedding gift for Grace's husband's sister. The pattern was complex, a variation on the traditional wedding ring design, and Martha was taking her time with it, making sure every stitch was perfect. Austin sat nearby, reading a book by lamplight, his glasses perched on his nose. They were comfortable in their silence, the kind of peace that came from knowing each other so well that words were not always necessary. "You remember the night you came to call on me for the first time?" Martha asked suddenly, her needle pausing mid-stitch. "At the boarding house when you asked if you could see me again." Austin looked up from his book, a smile tugging at his lips. "Of course I remember. I was terrified. I thought you would say no." "I could never have said no to you," Martha said. "Even then, when I barely knew you, I felt it. That connection, like we were meant to find each other." "We were," Austin said simply. "Some things are just meant to be." Martha finished the stitch she was working on and set down her needle. She stood and walked over to Austin's chair, and he set aside his book to pull her onto his lap. She rested her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "I love you," Martha said. "I know I tell you that every day, but I want to make sure you know it. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Austin Jennings." "And you are mine, Martha Jennings," Austin said, using her married name with pride. "From that first day when I pulled you from the fire, I knew you were special. I just did not know how much you would come to mean to me." They sat like that for a long time, the fire crackling in the stove, the night quiet outside. This was their life now, calm and settled, so different from those early days of struggle and uncertainty. But the love that had sustained them then was still there, still strong, woven into every aspect of their existence. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also joy and growth. Thomas took full control of the ranch when Austin finally retired at 60, ready to spend more time with Martha and their growing number of grandchildren. Grace had 4 children, and Samuel, after returning from university with a degree in business, married a teacher from town and gave them 2 more grandchildren. Martha continued to quilt, her hands now gnarled with arthritis but still capable of creating beauty. She taught all of her grandchildren to sew, passing on the tradition that had sustained her through so many difficult times. Her quilts hung in homes throughout Nevada and beyond, each one a testament to her skill and artistry. Austin grew quieter as he aged, content to sit on the porch and watch the world go by, but he never lost his devotion to Martha. He still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, still reached for her hand in the night, still kissed her goodbye every morning even though neither of them was going anywhere. When Martha turned 65, the family threw her a party. The house was filled with children and grandchildren, friends from town, ranch hands past and present. There was food and music and laughter, and at the center of it all was Martha, surrounded by the people whose lives she had touched. Grace presented her with a gift, a quilt made by all of the grandchildren working together under her supervision. It was imperfect in the way that only children's work could be, the stitches uneven, the pattern slightly askew. But it was the most precious thing Martha had ever received, and she cried as she held it. "It is perfect," she said, hugging each grandchild in turn. "Absolutely perfect." Austin watched from his chair, a smile on his weathered face, his eyes bright with love and pride. When the party was over and the guests had gone home, he helped Martha to bed, tucking the quilt the grandchildren had made around her. "Tired?" he asked, lying down beside her. "Happily so," Martha said. She turned to face him, studying the lines on his face, the gray in his hair, the way his eyes still held that silver gleam. We have had a good life, have we not? The best, Austin agreed. He touched her face gently. I would not change a single moment of it, not even the fire. Martha asked with a small smile. Especially not the fire, Austin said. Without it, I never would have met you. I would have just been a lonely cowboy working for wages, never knowing what I was missing. And I would have been alone in that house, Martha said. Alone and scared without you or the children or any of this. The fire took everything I had, but it gave me everything I needed. They fell asleep in each other's arms, the quilt covering them, the house quiet around them. And when they woke the next morning, they began another day together, just as they had for the past 47 years. Martha and Austin grew old together, their bodies failing but their spirits strong. They celebrated 50 years of marriage with another big party, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. Thomas gave a speech, thanking his parents for showing him what love and partnership looked like. Grace cried through the whole ceremony. Samuel, ever practical, presented them with a rocking bench for the porch, built with his own hands. So you can sit together and watch the sunset, he said, his voice gruff with emotion. And they did, every evening, watching the sky turn colors they had seen 1,000 times but never grew tired of. They talked about the past and the present, about the children and what they were doing, about the ranch and how well Thomas was running it. Sometimes they just sat in silence, holding hands, needing no words to communicate what they felt. When Martha was 73, she fell ill. It started as a cold that would not go away, then developed into pneumonia. The doctor did what he could, but medicine in rural Nevada in 1924 was limited. Martha fought the illness with the same strength she had shown throughout her life. But eventually, even her formidable will was not enough. On a cold November morning, with snow falling outside and Austin holding her hand, Martha Reynolds Jennings took her last breath. Her children and grandchildren surrounded the bed, and they were all crying, but Martha was at peace. She had lived a long, full life, had loved and been loved, had left a legacy of beauty in the world through her quilts and her children. Austin was devastated. For the first time in 51 years, he was alone, and he did not know how to function without Martha. He moved through the days in a fog, eating when someone reminded him, sleeping in fits and starts, always reaching for her in the night and finding only emptiness. Grace moved back to the ranch to care for him, bringing her youngest daughter who was still at home. She cooked and cleaned and tried to keep him engaged, but Austin had lost his spark. He sat on the porch in the rocking bench Samuel had made, staring out at the desert, one hand resting on the empty seat beside him. One evening, Thomas came to sit with him. They rocked in silence for a while, then Thomas said, "Tell me about the day you met Mother." Austin looked at his son, surprised. "You have heard that story 100 times. Tell me again," Thomas said. "I want to hear it." So Austin did. He told the story of the prairie fire, of riding toward the smoke and finding Martha standing in the flames. He told about pulling her to safety, about her strength and courage, about the way she had looked at him with eyes full of tears and gratitude. He told about calling on her at the boarding house, about their courtship, about asking her to marry him. She said yes without hesitation, Austin said, his voice thick. Like it was the easiest decision she had ever made, and from that day on we were partners in everything. She was my best friend, my love, my reason for getting up in the morning. I do not know how to do this without her. You do not have to do it alone, Thomas said gently. We are all here. Mother would want you to keep living to enjoy the family you built together. Austin nodded, but inside he was not sure he could. Without Martha, the world seemed dimmer, less interesting. She had been the color in his life, and now everything was gray. But as the weeks passed, Austin found himself drawn to the quilts Martha had made over the years. They hung on the walls and lay across the beds, a reminder of her skill and creativity. He would stand in front of them, running his fingers over the stitches, remembering the hours she had spent creating them. Grace found him like that one day, touching a quilt Martha had made for their 30th anniversary. "She loved making these," Grace said softly. She said every quilt told a story. "What story does this one tell?" Austin asked. Grace studied the pattern, a complex interlocking design in shades of blue and white. "This one tells the story of a life built together. See how the pieces interlock. How each one depends on the others to create the whole. That was you and Mother. You fit together perfectly and you made something beautiful." Austin felt tears on his cheeks, the first he had cried since Martha died. "I miss her so much." "I know," Grace said, hugging him. "We all do. But she is still here, Father. In these quilts, in us, in everything she touched. She wove herself into our lives, and that does not go away just because she is gone." Those words echoed Martha's words from so many years ago, when she had told Austin he had woven himself into her life forever. And Austin realized that Grace was right. Martha was still with them, in the children she had raised, in the quilts she had made, in the memories they all carried. He began to live again, slowly. He spent time with his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandmother. He helped Thomas with the ranch when his health allowed, offering advice born of decades of experience. He sat on the porch every evening, watching the sunset, imagining Martha beside him, her hand in his. 2 years after Martha died, Austin passed away in his sleep. The family buried him next to Martha in the cemetery outside El Dorado Canyon, under a headstone that read, "Austin Jennings, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. He rode into the fire and found his heart." At the funeral, Thomas stood to speak about his father. He talked about Austin's strength and kindness, his dedication to family and hard work. And then he told the story of how his parents met, of the Prairie fire and the rescue and the love that grew from that moment of crisis. "My father used to say that some things are meant to be," Thomas said, looking out at the assembled mourners. "He believed that he and my mother were meant to find each other, that the fire was just the universe's way of bringing them together. And looking at the life they built, the family they created, I believe he was right. They showed us all what love looks like when it is real and strong and lasting." After the funeral, the family gathered at the ranch house, the same house Austin and Martha had lived in for so many years. Grace brought out the quilt Martha had been working on when she died, a complex pattern in shades of red and gold that she had never finished. "I think we should complete it," Grace said. "All of us working together the way she taught us. It will be our gift to her memory." And so they did. Over the next several months, the women of the family gathered regularly to work on Martha's last quilt. They sat together, needles flashing, talking about Martha and Austin and the legacy they had left behind. When it was finished, they hung it in the main room of the ranch house, a testament to Martha's skill and the love that bound their family together. The quilt stayed there for generations, as the ranch passed from Thomas to his children and then to theirs. The story of Austin and Martha became a family legend, told and retold at reunions and holidays. The house was filled with Martha's quilts, each one treasured and cared for, and new generations learned to sew, carrying on the tradition she had started. El Dorado Canyon changed over the years, growing from a small town into something larger and more modern. But the cemetery remained, and people would sometimes stop at the graves of Austin and Martha Jennings, reading the inscriptions, wondering about the story behind the words. The local historical society eventually took an interest in Martha's quilts, recognizing them as works of art and historical significance. Several were donated to museums, where they hung in climate-controlled cases, admired by visitors who appreciated the skill and artistry that went into each one. But the most precious quilts remained with the family, passed down through the generations, each one carrying the story of a woman who survived a prairie fire and found love in the arms of the cowboy who saved her. They were more than just fabric and thread. They were history and memory and love made tangible, a reminder that even in the harshest places, beautiful things could grow. And on quiet evenings, when the desert wind blew across the Nevada prairie and the sky turned shades of orange and red, people swore they could feel something in the air. Not a ghost exactly, but a presence, a sense of love so strong it had become part of the land itself. The story of Austin and Martha Jennings became more than just family history. It became a touchstone for what was possible when two people committed to each other fully and completely. Their descendants told their children about the prairie fire and the rescue, about the courtship and the marriage, about the 51 years of partnership that followed. And in the telling and retelling, the story became something more than just facts and dates. It became a love story for the ages, a reminder that sometimes, in the most unlikely moments, we find exactly what we need. That sometimes, the worst day of our life can become the beginning of our greatest joy. That love, when it is real and true, can survive anything: fire, drought, hardship, loss, even death itself. The quilts Martha made were scattered now, across Nevada and beyond, each one in the home of someone who cherished it. But they were all connected, part of the same story, woven together by the hands of a woman who understood that every piece has its place, that every stitch matters, that beauty comes from taking disparate elements and creating something whole and complete. That was Martha's gift, the legacy she left behind. Not just the quilts themselves, but the understanding that life is like a quilt. It is made up of individual moments, some bright and some dark, some easy and some difficult. But when you step back and look at the whole, when you see how each piece fits with the others, you understand that it is all part of a larger pattern, a design that only becomes clear with time and perspective. Austin had been one of those pieces in Martha's life, perhaps the most important one. He had woven himself into her existence so completely that she could not imagine who she would have been without him. And she had done the same for him, transforming a lonely cowboy into a husband, father, grandfather, and successful rancher. Together, they had created something lasting, something that endured long after they were gone. And that, perhaps, is the truest measure of a life well lived, not what we accumulate or achieve, but what we leave behind in the hearts and memories of those who loved us. The ranch continued to prosper under the care of Thomas, and then his children. The land that had been so harsh and unforgiving revealed its gifts to those willing to work hard and persist. Cattle grazed on the pastures, horses ran in the corrals, and the house that Austin had built remained solid and strong, sheltering generation after generation of his descendants. In the town of El Dorado Canyon, the story of Austin and Martha was told to visitors who came to explore the old mining town and its history. It was mentioned in historical accounts and documented in archives. But the real story, the true heart of it, was kept alive by the family who carried their blood and their legacy. On the 100th anniversary of the Prairie fire that had brought Austin and Martha together, the family held a reunion at the ranch. More than 200 people came, descendants of Austin and Martha, all connected by the love story that had begun with a rescue from the flames. They gathered in the main house, now expanded and modernized but still recognizable as the home Austin and Martha had built. The oldest living descendant, Thomas's daughter Rebecca, now 92 years old, stood to speak. "I remember my grandmother," she said, her voice strong despite her age. "She was small but fierce, with hands that were always moving, always creating. She taught me to sew when I was 5 years old, and I still have the first quilt square I ever made. She was patient and kind, but she had steel in her spine. She survived losing everything and built a life from scratch. And she loved my grandfather with a devotion that never wavered, even for a moment." Rebecca paused, looking around at all the faces, young and old, all carrying a piece of Austin and Martha in their features. They set an example for all of us about what it means to truly love someone, to commit to them through good times and bad, to build something lasting together. And they taught us that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best things, if we are brave enough to keep going. There was silence after she finished speaking, and then someone started to clap. The applause grew, filling the house, a tribute to two people who had been gone for decades but whose influence was still felt by everyone in that room. Later, the family laid a wreath at Austin and Martha's grave in the cemetery. The sun was setting, painting the sky in those familiar shades of orange and red, and as they stood there in silence, it was easy to imagine Austin and Martha beside them, holding hands, smiling at what they had created. The Prairie fire that had nearly taken Martha's life in 1878 had instead given her a new one, filled with love and purpose and meaning. And Austin, the cowboy who had ridden into the flames without hesitation, had found in Martha a partner who matched him in every way, in strength, in determination, in capacity for love. Their story was simple in many ways. A rescue, a courtship, a marriage, a life built together on hard work and commitment. But it was also extraordinary in its ordinariness, a testament to the idea that the most profound things in life are often the simplest: love, family, perseverance, faith. As the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness fell over the Nevada desert, the family returned to the ranch house. Inside, Martha's quilts hung on the walls, warm and beautiful, each one a story, each one a memory. And in the comfort of that house, surrounded by the evidence of lives well lived and love that endured, Austin and Martha's descendants celebrated the legacy they had been given and pledged to carry it forward into the future, one stitch, one moment, one act of love at a time. The pattern was complete, the story had been told, and the love that began in fire had burned bright for more than a century, warming everyone it touched, weaving itself into the fabric of a family that would endure as long as anyone remembered the names Austin Jennings and Martha Reynolds, and the day a cowboy rode into a prairie fire and found his heart.